Hi, this is Nicole Miller, and you're watching YA Wise, a hub for parents and readers.
Hello, and welcome back for our next book, which is going to be The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainani. This book was published in 2013 by HarperCollins. So it follows our two main characters, Sophie and Agatha, as they're taken from their village and placed in the schools for good and evil, where fairy tale characters go to train. Initially, they feel that they have been assigned to the wrong schools, but as time goes on, they learn to embrace their true inner selves and combat stereotypes of their schools. So this is the first of 3 books within its series, which is followed by a second series with a lot of the same characters, but sort of a different main plot line throughout of 3 books. And apparently, I just learned this as I was getting ready for this episode, is there's going to be another 3-book series, I think, at least another series, same sort of characters, and the first book is coming out this month. It may have just come out, actually. So this book was actually also recently adapted into a Netflix movie. It's done very well, so starring Sophia Ann Caruso as Sophie, and then Sophia Wiley as Agatha. I've seen it. It's a great movie on its own. I do feel like it does not necessarily do this book justice, so it did make me a little sad. So yeah, let's get. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of what's going on with this book. So first, the author, Soman Chainani, he graduated from Harvard University and the Columbia University's MFA film program. So most of his work is actually in film and TV, with the School for Good and Evil being, I think, his only book series, but there's kind of multiple series within this universe that he's written, all of which have done pretty well. He was nominated for the Waterstone Prize for Children's Literature, which I'll get to. I've got a list of this book's awards, and received the Sun Valley Writers Fellowship, so pretty well recognized. This book has won a number of awards: the New York Times bestseller, ABA Indie List bestseller, Waterstone Children's Book Prize Best Fiction for 5 through 12. It was nominated in 2014, Barnes & Noble Best Book of 2013, and the Books A Million Best Book of 2013. It was on Entertainment Weekly's Pop Watch list, Children's Choice Reading List selection, Goodreads Choice semi-finalist as a best children's book, and it's an indie next pick. So a number of awards there. It was very popular when it first came out. I do remember that, and recently has been adapted into a movie. So the movie, I think, did pretty well. It was released by Netflix this past fall. I enjoyed watching it. I don't feel like it was a great adaptation of this book. I remember the first time I read this book thinking that, like, man, this is just so beautiful and, like, cinematic. And then I watched the movie and I was like, man, there were some things that they did that I would not have done. It just sort of changed some stuff up in a way that I thought was interesting. It's a good movie. It's worth watching. But if you're, like, super fan of the book, it's not entirely faithful. There's some details that they change. There were some moments that I was like, I felt like they were kind of jumping ahead to later books that I think they plan to adapt at least the rest of the first series, but I guess I'm not 100% certain. Yeah, but I think it got pretty good reviews. People weren't too mad about it. There was one scene that I'll talk about in a minute that's my absolute favorite scene in the book that was not in the movie. I'll tell you, we don't have to get into that quite yet. So this book is rated a 4.5 out of 5 stars on Amazon and 4 stars even on Goodreads. Reading it myself, it's not a perfect book. I enjoyed it. It's a fun story. It's very interesting to read and to think about. The world is very immersive. It draws you in. It's just, yeah, one of those was just kind of like, yeah, it's a fun, enjoyable book, and that's what we're looking for. It's not necessarily a great literary masterpiece, which is fine sometimes, books just need to be fun, and that's what this book is, and that's great. Recommended age level for this book. The ATOS book level is a 5.2, so that's like 5th grade, 2nd month. And then the recommended grade based on interest and kind of content is grades 4 to 8. Lexile score is an 830, so it's recommended ages 11 to 13. So, as I mentioned, there is sort of a lot of violence. There's torture. That's how the kids from the School for Evil are punished, as they're sent to the doom room, which has a giant werewolf that tortures students. Sophie kills him, or the first time, like, she's sent to the doom room, he cuts her hair, and she shoves him in the river, and he dies. So then that does not continue. There's not torture, because they're like, man, good help is so hard to find. That werewolf just wandered off. I wonder where he is. The students attempt to kill Sophie. There's lots of, like, cursing each other that goes on. There are some intense topics going on in this book that are good to be aware of as parents. Maybe not great for younger readers. Also, like I mentioned, some problematic romances going on of, like, Tedros is a little too much of the, like, Prince Charming mindset of, like, I must be the man, and does not leave space for Agatha to be a smart, independent, strong woman. And then also the thing with the schoolmaster at the end that just, I've always had a lot of questions about. He looks like a young man, but he's still thousands of years old. Yeah, I don't know. Not that this is a terrible, morally degrading book, but these are things to be aware of. I don't believe it will scar your children. Yes. So, kind of summarize the plot of the book for you. It begins with Sophie and Agatha. They live in the village of Gavaldon, and Gavaldon is isolated. It's in the middle of the woods, and anytime anybody's ever tried to, like, leave Gavaldon, they just end up wandering back into town from another direction in the woods. So, implied magic there. Sophie is very much I don't even know the right way to describe it, but she is very concerned with her appearance. She wants to be beautiful all the time, which in this village in the middle of the woods, it's not super common, and she's very vain. And other people around her recognize that. She thinks that she's a little too good, and so her ticket out, she believes, is through the School for Good and Evil. The schoolmaster comes every 4 years, yeah, and kidnaps 2 children from the village, and generally the village regards this as a bad thing. They're like, please stop taking our children. And they eventually, at first, like, just 2 kids would go missing every couple years, and they were like, what is going on here? And then they started to realize it was the best kid, best behaved, and the worst kid. There were the 2 that would be taken. And they then later realized eventually these kids would show up in their fairy tales, because the only sort of outside world contact they have is every couple of years they get a box with a bunch of fairy tales in it, and as they were reading these, they started to recognize some of the characters were these kids that were being kidnapped. So they eventually figured out that they're like, we think this is a the schoolmaster from the School for Good and Evil, because their logo's on the box, is kidnapping our children and sending them to school, and we would like that to not happen, because things don't typically go well for these kids in their fairy tales. Like, both of them just true, like, Brothers Grimm, bad fairy tale things happen to them. So every year they know which night it's gonna happen, and they really try and prevent it. So their parents are like, good kids, please smear dirt on your face, and bad kids go take care of someone, like, try and counteract it so you're not either the worst or the best. However, Sophie is like, no, I want to go to the school, because that's how I become a princess, and I am obviously beautiful like a princess, so I'm going to do my good deeds. And so she kind of has chosen these outcasts and she's like, I'm going to be so kind to them and take care of them and be their friend, and look at me, I'm so good. And so she packs all her stuff up that night and gets ready, and her father boards up her window and is like, please do not get kidnapped tonight. And she was like, no. So she like tears the boards off. But one of her friends that she's adopted is Agatha. Agatha lives kind of outside of town, inside the cemetery with her mom, who's a medicinal healer, and all the town believes that both of them are witches and is not a fan of them. And so Sophie is like, Agatha, you are a witch, you live in the graveyard, I'm beautiful, so I'm gonna be the princess of School for Good, and you're gonna come with me and you're gonna be at the School for Evil. And Agatha's like, I don't think I believe in all of that. Count me out, I'm not interested. But that night, Sophie breaks out of her room and goes off to find Agatha so they can be together, and they're ready when the schoolmaster comes to get them. And they are grabbed by this giant bony bird, and they are taken away to the school, and Agatha at first thinks she's been taken by mistake because she like grabs Sophie to try and wrestle her away from the bird. But eventually realizes like, no, the two of us were taken on purpose. However, Sophie is dropped in the School for Evil, and Agatha is dropped in the School for Good, which Agatha wears all black, and they say she has a weird helmet hairstyle and only wears clogs. And so they show up there, and all the other students at these schools look at them and say, you do not belong here. You are not like the rest of us. And even like the teachers kind of are a little bit like, what is this? And so the girls try and switch, but are told, nope, the schoolmaster put you in the schools you are in, so you need to stay in those schools. So they start classes, and eventually they figure out how to break into the schoolmaster's tower. So there used to be two. There was a good brother and a bad brother, an evil brother. However, there was a duel, and one of them was killed, and one survives, but nobody knows which brother it is. However, ever since, the historian, which is the magic pin, has only written stories where fairy tales where good wins, which these fairy tales are just the lives of the students after they graduate. And so everyone's convinced, they're like, it must be the good brother because that's why good's always winning. But Sophie and Agatha figure out how to break into his tower. And Agatha says, please send us home. We do not belong here. And Sophie says, no, you don't belong in the School for Good. I do. Put her in the School for Evil. Put me in the School for Good. And that'll be great. And the schoolmaster says, nope. It's not how this is gonna work. And so he says, well, if you can prove that you are in the wrong schools or that you're in the wrong world, we'll send you home. And so they're left with a riddle. They have to figure out what is one thing good can have, good must have, and evil never can. And so they go back to their schools that they've been assigned to and try and puzzle it out, and both kind of struggle through classes where Agatha's going to classes on beautification and how to have a light, bubbly laugh, and she's like, these don't seem like important life skills to me. And Sophie's going classes on uglification and cursing people, and she's like, I don't want this. I want to be a pretty princess. And they discover that their classmates are all the children of famous fairy tale characters. So that freaks Sophie out. She's like, I don't want to be roommates with a bunch of witches. The most notable classmate is Tedros. So he's set up as the love interest, sort of, for both girls. And he is the son of King Arthur and Guinevere. So he's kind of fighting some of his own inner turmoil of, well, my father was this great king until the very end when he was not, and so I have to, do better than him. So Sophie is like, oh, they figure it out. They're like, the answer to the riddle is love. Good has love and evil does not. And so Sophie, they're like, okay, we can figure this out and set Sophie up with Tedros, then Agatha says we can go home. Sophie says I can be in the School for Good because it'll show that I'm a princess, because the best prince fell in love with me. So they start to work on this, and Sophie eventually embraces the black clothing that she has to wear and starts teaching lessons on beauty to all of the nevers. And then they're entered in a trial by tale. So the trial by tale is sort of the midterm test, where the 5 best students from each class are put in an arena that simulates the woods, but it's a little less deadly. And they have to battle it out and try to, the last one standing wins. And so Sophie manages to get in. Like, she was doing really well in her classes for a while and then stopped, got distracted because she was teaching all the classmates how to be beautiful, and so then Agatha starts helping Sophie, and she like sneaks into her classes disguised as a little bug or something, and gives Sophie all the answers. So then Sophie starts doing well again, and so then Agatha's having some conflicts because she's doing well both in her good and her evil classes. And so she's like, I don't know what this means. She helps Sophie kind of. And so then Sophie gets into the arena, and she and Tedros are like, okay, we're gonna last this out together. It'll show that we, belong together, and that Sophie should be put in the school for good. But Sophie ends up going in much earlier than Tedros because she started failing her classes again when Agatha had to go back to her own. And so she ends in there. Agatha eventually breaks into the trial to save Sophie because the other class, all the rest of the students within the 2 schools are like, this is weird and messed up, and are very against Sophie, and they actually make a pact to try and kill her. So that's pretty intense, but she's like, I might die in this. And so Agatha eventually ends up breaking into the trial, gets herself hurt in the process, and saves Sophie, and the 2 of them are hiding out as shrubs, waiting for Tedros to arrive so he can finish protecting Sophie. And he shows up, and other students start to attack him, and he's in real danger. And so Agatha's like, Sophie, go save him and show, And Sophie's like, no, he's fine. And so then eventually Agatha has to reveal herself that she snuck into this trial by tale. She saves Tedros. Tedros has this crazy inner conflict of like, I really feel like I should be in love with the beautiful one, but I keep, like, Agatha, the ugly one, keeps showing up and proving me wrong. So then he's super angry with Sophie of, you said that you were going to do this with me, but then you didn't. And you didn't keep your promise and all of that, and betrayed him, right? He was those issues from his parents. And so then no one dies in the trial by tale, which is good. Agatha gets in some pretty serious trouble for breaking the rules and entering when she was not supposed to, but alas. So then they continue on in their classes. Sophie starts to have symptoms of developing a nemesis, which is sort of the ultimate goal for a villain, is to have a true nemesis. And so there's various symptoms of it, and so she thinks that it's Tedros, and so she's like, okay, now I'm gonna have to kill him because that's the only way to survive this. And yeah, it's just intense. And Agatha then decides, you know what, Sophie's not gonna help me get out of here, so I might as well kind of lean in, and starts very much investing in the school for good. She does have a problem where students who fail are turned into magical objects, so all of the like talking woodland creatures in fairy tales are actually failed students. She's like, that's messed up, and she's actually able to save a student at one point who'd been converted into some fish, which shows her true inner goodness. Yeah. So the book and their school year ends with the Circus of Talents. I think that's right. And so each student has to prepare a talent for this and then whichever one has the best talent wins, and their school gets lots of honor. And so they all prepare, and then afterwards, Good has a ball. And so all of the girls and everyone from Good, which they're being judged on and have to pass that to make it to the next level of class the next year. And, you know, if they fail, they're turned into an animal, or like a magic teapot or something, which is not, yeah. And so what they do is the girls are all getting ready, and the girls must have a date to go to the ball, or else they automatically fail, and the boys can just get like half points if they don't take a girl. So the boys are all saying like, well, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna take the half points? Because nobody's gonna ask her, and there's the same number of boys and girls. And so the girls are all lined up of like, okay, I know that if like this boy says yes to me, then I can wear this dress, and if this guy does, I'll borrow this dress from her. And are all planning, because the boys have all said, we're not going to ask them to be our dates to the ball until after the Circus of Talents. And so it's caused havoc for these girls, who are all very vain and concerned with their looks. So they all go up and they demonstrate their talents, and Agatha goes, and she gets up and starts, she's not sure this whole time what she's going to do, but she gets up and starts giving a speech about that failed students should please not be turned into inanimate objects. That's incredibly unfair. And so at the end, then her own kind of inner personal magic reveals that that all of the fairies for the school for good and werewolves for the school for evil that are kind of like bodyguards slash disciplinarians slash like just nuisances around, that just kind of like run things, but they're not the teachers. There's also professors on top of them. But reveals that all of these magical beings are actually former students who, and then they're assigned to the opposite school. So all of the fairies are Never students, and then the werewolves are Evers. Then they've been forced within this context that they do not belong. And so then she's got the best score, and it's, okay, Agatha's going to win, and Sophie had never shown up. And so some people are kind of suspicious of like what's going on. And then at the last moment, Sophie breaks in, and she is turned fully into an evil, ugly witch, and she calls in all of these hideous animals, like bugs, sort of in the like Snow White fashion of like, oh, look, all the birds, but she calls like rats. And so then Sophie wins, and the building that they're in is actually transported onto the other side of campus, because that's what the Nevers get when they win. And starts like this chaos of freaks the Evers out a lot, that like this girl has gone full evil witch, and I think she tries to kill Agatha in that moment. But all of the teachers are still like frozen in time after this happens, and so they go back to their castles, and they're like, there's no teachers. I think the werewolves and fairies as well are like frozen as they try to like break things up after Sophie's talent, and so they're all frozen, and so it's just the students. So they go back to their castles, and the Evers are like, this is bad. They're going to come attack us and try and kill us. At one point they propose, they're like, we could still have the ball, and somebody goes, no, like, we're at war, we're not gonna do that. So they prepare to charge on that, and Agatha's like, this is a bad idea, this is a trap, don't do it. And Tedros is like, no, I'm your true love, and as your Prince Charming, I'm telling you, no, like, don't let us plan this. And she's like, this is a very bad plan. Meanwhile, in the Nevers castle, Sophie is trapped by her roommates who are like, something's wrong with you, we don't know how to handle that. So they lock her in her room, but she has set up a whole ball, a Nevers ball, because the Nevers have always kind of been put down, especially since they've started losing all their fairy tales, to celebrate them. And so they're all having this joyous good time, and then the Evers break in, and because they're expecting the Nevers getting ready to come attack them, so then they break in, and it ends up just being the Nevers are having a party. And so the Nevers are like, if you're gonna attack us, we're gonna attack you. And they're like, free the witch! And they bring down Sophie, and she starts wreaking havoc with her magic, and Agatha shows up, and chaos ensues. Eventually, Sophie ends up in the schoolmaster's tower, and it is revealed that he is the brother for evil, and he's like, I've been looking for my one true evil love all this time. Sophie, it's you. Will you marry me? And she's like, a Prince Charming who's like me, I'd love to. But also she still looks like an evil witch at this time. And also he's thousands of years old magical entity. So this is highly problematic, if you ask me. Soman Chainani did not. But she's like, yes, but wait, but like not right now. And he's like, we could be the one true evil pairing. And then Agatha shows up and it's like, Sophie, this is a terrible idea, please stop. And they fall out of the schoolmaster's tower. I can't remember if he pushes him or what happens there. And Sophie falls and is dying. And Agatha rushes to save her because she's like, this is my friend. And meanwhile, this whole battle with the two schools is going on behind them. And Tedros sees it and is like, Agatha, wait, no, come back to me so I can protect you and be your hero. But Sophie rushes to her and hugs her friend and kisses her, and that is like true love's kiss, and the two of them are transported back home into Gabaldon of they found love not with a boy but in their friendship and love for each other. They showed that a princess and a witch can be friends, and that's where that book leads off. Okay, so our main characters in this book are Sophie and Agatha. So Sophie they're both sort of shown to be the true, purest form of either good or evil. So Sophie is true evil, which more than just being sort of a despicable person, ends up being more of she is very self-centered. It's all about Sophie's goals and what Sophie wants, and like Sophie needs to be beautiful and Sophie will be your friend because that'll make her look good, kind of is all of her driving force. She kind of goes back and forth throughout how evil she wants to be. She starts out the book believing like, oh no, I belong in good, like I should be a princess, and like fighting and rebelling against it. And then eventually she kind of like embraces it and is like, well, I guess if I'm stuck here, I'll learn it to be prepared for our future battles. Then she starts trying to teach all of the Nevers to be also beautiful and have poise and good manners, instead of just slimy and gross. And she goes back and forth at what she's doing, and then by the end she kind of fully becomes an evil witch looking like an old hag, but she is not. Agatha is then the true, kind of her opposite, the true good, but she does not look like it. I don't think she's self-conscious of her looks before going into the school, and then maybe is a little bit because everyone around her is very focused on their own appearance. She is very concerned with the well-being of others. She wants to help people. She wants to help Sophie and be like, Sophie, come home. But also she wants to be safe, and she wants to just be at her cottage with her mom and her cat. Sort of the opposite of Sophie. She does eventually kind of is like, well, not being concerned with your looks doesn't have to be a self-centered thing, and so does a little bit sort of like, okay, I can be pretty, and like that can be something that makes me happy. It doesn't have to be just, because someone else told me I have to. She doesn't want to conform to those kind of social standards throughout. And then there's Tedros, who son of King Arthur and Guinevere, and he very much wants to live up to what his father did and then surpass that of not letting Camelot fall into ruin. We see in the second series that Camelot has, in a lot of ways, kind of gone to waste in the period between King Arthur's death and then Tedros taking the throne at that point. So I guess Camelot then, by that logic, has no leader right now. I don't know. It's something that's introduced much later into the series, so not a concern of this book. He wants to be a hero, but has sort of been indoctrinated into these ideas of what it means to be good, and is a little self-centered and vain, but also does want to protect his friends, and is obsessed a little bit with chivalry, to the point that he sometimes takes it too far and is like, no, I am Prince Charming, listen to me, and he feels like he's the only one who can have good ideas, but so then he serves sort of as the role model for that, the romance for both girls. So he has a big crush on him, and Agatha's not interested until the end, which then she's like, actually, Tedros, if I'm gonna buy into this princess thing. And he kind of is drawn to her throughout. It's shown that they have true love. It's the two of them, that they're sort of drawn to each other, which he's upset about for a good portion of it, the book, of like, she's a witch, I don't want to be, she's not my true love. So most of the students for good kind of fall in the middle between good and bad. That their students for good are very obsessed with their looks, have kind of lost the true meaning of goodness. Sort of because they always win their fairy tales, they've gone soft. They're not really fighting for the right things. It's more like, look beautiful, find your true love, live happily ever after, as opposed to help people, you know? Yes. And then Sophie's roommates, Hester, Adnil, and Dot, they form a coven, the three of them, that's what they call themselves. So they're students for evil. They're all, Dot, I think, is the daughter of, like, the huntsman, maybe, from Snow White? That may be wrong. No, she's the daughter of, Robin is the sheriff from Nottingham, from Robin Hood. And then the other two girls, their moms are famous witches that Sophie recognizes early on. And so they are very antagonistic towards Sophie for a large portion of the book, and kind of actually bond with Agatha of, you look like us, you should come be a part of our friend group, and like try and then talk reason to Sophie when she starts going off the rails sometimes. Hester is sort of the lead student within their school, so when the times when Sophie is being a very good student and showing a lot of power, she gets upset. They're actually the ones who lead the charge to try and get Sophie killed during the trial of Tales. So throughout the book, the teens and adolescents in this book, they got the issues. Sophie and Agatha's friendship is not always ideal, just from the point that Sophie is incredibly self-centered, and their friendship is entirely to base her in her perspective. But Agatha is a good friend and looks out for her friends' interests. The students, they do learn kind of what it means to be friends and kind of how to take care of each other and help each other. When Sophie throws the ball for the Nevers, they kind of all recognize and appreciate, and when she kind of tries to teach them the lessons about how to be beautiful, that she recognizes them, her classmates, for being more than just, well, we're evil and we always lose our fairy tales. I do think this book does a good job of showing adolescents of being independent and like good thinkers and like critical problem solvers. Yeah, so even though the students are obviously flawed, as anyone would be, they are not caricatures, I feel like, which I do really, really appreciate. Okay, so let's look at the lessons within this book. So the first one that I've pulled out is finding and embracing your true self. So my favorite scene in this whole book, which is not in the movie, which is probably the part that I was the saddest about, is Agatha, sort of middle end, decides that she wants to be a true good princess, and so she goes to Professor Dovey, the fairy godmother, and tells her, I need a makeover so that I can be beautiful and I can be truly good and a true princess, because sort of that is the way that good is treated, is you have to be beautiful. And so Professor Dovey is like, all right, and whisks her away to the groom room, which is sort of the beauty salon within the school. And they blindfold her and are doing all of these things, and she comes out afterwards and believes that she's been totally beautified, full makeover, all of that. And then she goes out and everyone's looking at her and she feels beautiful, and they're looking at her and they're like, oh my gosh, who is that? At first they don't recognize her. And she just feels so much better about herself that she almost, and then learns pretty quickly, they haven't done anything to her. That her true beauty is within herself and her confidence in herself. And that believing that she was beautiful is what truly made her beautiful, and that all of these things that, the reason that she does well at her classes for good, and that she has been able to do these things is because that is who she truly is, and it's not these superficial things on the outside that matter. So that is my favorite scene within the book, and I think definitely exemplifies this lesson. And yeah, it's not in the movie. Come on, it made me really sad. Which I did find an article about it, and it was because one of the lead Sophia actresses, Sophia Wiley, was like, well, I didn't want to subscribe to sort of the common idea of, you get the makeover and then you're beautiful, which I do think misses the mark, because they don't really give her a makeover. If I remember correctly, they're give her basic, a little bit of a trim, a little haircut, trim her split ends or something, and that's it. So I was bummed that was not in there. I think that's a really great message. Also, about embracing who you truly are and not feeling like you need to hide behind something. Agatha did not need to hide behind what she really looked like. It is who she really is that mattered. Sophie also has sort of a moment like this, that she sort of throughout the book sort of seesaws a little bit between being very powerful, evil, and getting distracted, and not being as much. And it is in those moments that she fully embraces that essence of evil, which obviously a little questionable. We'll get to that later. That she is the most powerful, and that her magic is sort of truly formed, and that she's able to do these miraculous feats. Also, these two girls have a shared history as readers, that they are not from this world, that all of the rest of their peers are, and so that's the way it informs the way that other people look at them. But also they find later strength in that because they come from outside of this world, they don't need to be insecure of what they don't know, or that they've missed out on something, but they bring an important new perspective that they're able to use to combat some of these things that they come up against. Also, there's this prophecy about them that these two readers are going to come and completely change things, and it's set up pretty clearly that that's going to be Agatha and Sophie. Now, Tedros, our Prince Charming, he also is sort of trapped in that same idea of needing to find who he truly is and living up to this outside idea of he needs to be, his father's regarded as a strong, magnificent king, King Arthur, and so he needs to be able to outlive him, almost outshine him in the way that he let Camelot fall after losing his mother, Queen Guinevere, Arthur lost Tedros' mother. And so he is sort of trapped by that idea that he then misses out on some of his own potential, because he can't see it. Now, this can obviously go too far with Sophie. At first goes too far in the wrong direction of, well, I'm beautiful, so I must be good, and like is sort of pushing herself beyond, and she's like, I'm doing all these good acts, but they're really very selfish. And so that's not who she really is, and then eventually she ends up going completely off the rails of like, well, I'm evil, so I'm going to completely succumb to that, and just goes a little crazy. And so obviously at adolescence is learning to balance those two ideas of, you know, become comfortable in who you are, but also don't feel like you have to be like, well, I'm gonna do everything to the max, which can sometimes be an adolescent tendency, right? Like, it's not a phase, and then going full out, and really where they want to be is a couple steps back. So this connects with the development theory of Erik Erikson, who he's like my favorite developmental theorist. His stuff makes sense to me. So he's got ideas of sort of each life stage you're going through different identity crisis, facing sort of two conflicting options. So from ages 13 to 21, the identity crisis that you're undergoing is specifically identity, who am I, versus confusion of, I don't know what my position and my place is within the world, which very clearly addresses the adolescent experience of who am I, what do I want to do, you know, who are my friends going to be, what idea do I associate myself with. So establishing that identity is a key part of the adolescent experience. It's important to kind of learn to judge yourself, look into others and see things, determining if the traits that you have that other people have are good things, bad things, if they're things you want, that you don't want. And so it's that period, like these characters, of learning to embrace who you are and who you want to be, without sort of losing yourself in that almost. So the university recommends for parents, don't be alarmed in these sorts of changes, especially changes in appearance. They say unusual hair colors will grow out, clothing fads will change. Pick your battles and keep these issues in perspective. So just keep in mind that obviously they're going through these different these conflicts within themselves, also sort of with their peers, seeing other people go through this, right? Agatha has to watch Sophie from the outside, sort of these waves of, I'm gonna be perfect, pristine, get the prince so I can get into good, to, I am fully an evil witch. Look at me, I am hairless and warty. Yeah, and so that produces conflict within Agatha. She sees that, as well as she's navigating her own battle, which is very realistic to the high school experience of like, I don't know what my friends are doing, I don't know what I'm doing, we're all a little bit lost here. So yeah, encourage your teens and adolescents to pursue their interests in things like sports or music or hobbies or wherever their interests lie, so that they can try new things and hopefully kind of find the places where, okay, these are the things that I like, that I want to develop within myself, and sort of build that identity in things that are not so superficial, like looks, but in things that they do and they can do well, and that kind of things. So yes, help your teen identify their strengths and choose activities that let them use those strengths and to really feel like they can shine and can do well. Such as, you know, if your kid's a good arguer, encourage them to join debate. Or if they like to draw, maybe an art club, different things like that, that as parents, if you can recognize those things, you can then help support this transition and this help find a little bit of healthy balance there. Alright, so we're on to our next lesson. And this book shows the high importance of friendship in adolescent development and life. So the main friendship we're seeing here is Agatha and Sophie, obviously, and their oppositeness, right? And the book ends with the two of them choosing each other over this fairy tale world and choosing to return home. Also at the heart of the novel is, that desk is wet. They are told that to sort of get what they want, they have to prove that they can be friends. So Sophie wants to be allowed into the school for good. She says, I'm not a witch, I am a princess. Please let me go to the school for good where I can be a princess and be beautiful. And then Agatha is saying, we don't belong here. Please let us go home. And so the schoolmaster as well as the teachers say, well, you have to prove that then either you belong not in the schools that you're in or you don't belong here, and sort of can show us that you are outside of the typical fairy tale rules, the rules of our world. And the way that they prove that is that they have to show that they love each other, and that a princess and a witch, you know, the fairy tales say a princess and witch can't be friends, but Agatha and Sophie show that they can, and that's how they eventually escape at the end of the novel back to Gavaldon. And so it's that friendship, that tight bond that they need each other. They also, they provide balance for each other. Agatha keeps Sophie from completely going off the rails and being a super evil witch and cursing the whole school and marrying the evil schoolmaster. But at the end, you know, the two of them choose their friendship over these potential romantic interests, right, with the schoolmaster and Tedros, which schoolmasters is a little problematic, but you know, we talked about that. And so they choose that friendship to be sort of the most important, that key element for them. And then Sophie helps keep Agatha interested and focused at the school, where it is something that she can excel at and like has talents and does belong there ultimately, is sort of what is determined by the end of this whole series. And so together they balance each other. Sophie also helps Agatha keep from going just like full airhead princess, like, oh yes, I'm just going to be beautiful and I'll marry the most beautiful prince and like we'll have our kingdom with my talking fairy friends or whatnot. That they keep each other focused on the same goal. Sophie gets distracted, right? But you know, that's within who she is, her personality. So also we see a good example of friendship within the coven. So Sophie's three roommates, these witches, that they are able to work together as leaders within their school and develop their own powers, and sort of counter Sophie a little bit when she starts going off the rails. And even though these are evil, they're from the evil school, and where they're not supposed to have friends necessarily, they do work together and develop that relationship that helps all of them, that they are friends. But, so looking at one study, so when adolescents have friends, the study examined kids from ages 10 to 25, when they had close emotional links kind of continuing throughout their lives, they had lower levels of anxiety, depression, and higher levels of self-worth. So friends are important. And I think that this book shows the importance of what friends can do sort of short-term and helping develop identity and relational aspects. Scientifically, we see that teens are sort of starting to transition towards more peer-focused rather than family-focused. So these deep peer relationships sort of become possible for the first time at this age, and sort of there becomes a natural response of wanting approval and connection outside of the family, sort of in preparation to transition into an individual adult life that is good and healthy, though I can imagine as a parent is kind of probably sad. I don't know. I don't have kids. To see that a little bit. It can be hard to watch that transition away from the family, wanting to keep them close, but also it's good, it's healthy, it's good to support, and having good friends is good for them. So specifically looking at female friendships, right, because our key examples are Sophie and Agatha, and then the Coven. Girls' friendships tend to be more focused on intimacy and support, whereas boys focus more on enjoyment and companionship, which then leads to female friendships becoming more solid and like deeper connections. They're more conversational by nature, which is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It just sort of reflects the different independent needs of each gender. And so these relationships become much sturdier and deeper, but also female friendships tend to be a little bit less likely to last, especially in conditions where the participants, the two friends, have major differences either in interests, academic level, in academic interest, to say interest half a dozen times, or even like socioeconomic disparities within a friendship make them less stable, less likely to last, which we see with Sophie and Agatha, right? That they have very different personalities, and they're that sort of volatile female friendship that is characterized often in modern media, that we see when these things, they are tight, and then when they fall apart, it can be somewhat catastrophic. So it's important to learn to maintain those friendships, and friendship is not just something that happens and then you can kind of just do. They require maintenance and thinking, and you have to be interested in that other person and giving for them as well as your own interests. And so we see Agatha somewhat working towards that. There are times that she ignores what Sophie wants. Sophie wants to stay and to be at the school for good. Agatha just wants to get home. Sophie, in the same way, just wants to be a princess. She does not want to be at this school for evil. And so she uses Agatha, but Agatha also ignores her wishes. And so this causes a lot of the tension that sort of on and off throughout the novel, where, oh, we're super tight, okay, we're gonna work together and we're gonna get out of this to find the outcome we want. Oh, Sophie detours because she wants to chase the boy, or Agatha pushes one way or another. It causes some pretty major problems, right? They have a falling out at the end that leads to Sophie, like, raining down terror on the whole school, and like this massive bloody battle and these horrible events happen as this friendship implodes, that then sort of resolved, not really, as they come together then at the end and learn to mend that friendship and to share those same goals. Alright, so coming to our final lesson, that maybe is a little bit less of a lesson and a little more, at least just like a broad discussion point after reading this book. It's the inevitable good versus evil, and that's what this novel is about, right? We have the school for good, the school for evil, division between Sophie and Agatha. I'll be honest, I read this book and I went, oh no, I'm gonna have to talk about that, and I don't know. It's hard to say, well, here's the lesson on what it means to be a good person, right? To sum it up, it's hard. So if we look at what the book says, so the school has the 5 sort of key principles that compares good versus evil. So the evil attack, the good defend, the evil punish, the good forgive, the evil hurt, the good help, the evil take, the good give, the evil hate, and the good love. And so that is sort of the way that each student is told that they need to behave within the confines of that for their respective school. And then the two girls, Agatha and Sophie, don't necessarily conform to those expectations, and that is how they escape at the end of the novel, right? That they choose to love each other, and they choose to forgive the hurt that they've gone through, and help each other to work together where they are not necessarily showing what they're told that they should based on their natures, because it's just shown throughout the book that they, everybody is either a good or a bad soul, or I can't remember if they call it a soul, but that kind of idea that you either are innately good or you are innately bad. And so these two girls are shown to be very pure in that. They both have an incident early on where sort of their true nature is shown, and everyone's kind of shocked because, they physically do not look like what internally they feel like internally are what they're supposed to be, but externally everybody's like, you don't look the right way to be here. So that sort of judgment permeates, where Sophie's class is working with a golden goose, and they have to convince the goose to lay a large golden egg. And so, during Sophie's turn, she is able to converse with the goose telepathically, and the goose is like, oh, you look like a princess, what do you want? I will grant you any wish. And Sophie's like, please lay me a giant golden egg so I can pass this class, and they will see that I'm good, and that I can get out of this terrible evil school and go to where I belong with all the beautiful people. And then the golden goose is actually like, oh, your true nature is bad. And gives up its power and just becomes a normal goose because it would rather do that than help her. And then Agatha has an incident where she's working with, they have wish fish, and so the professor's like, oh yes, each girl, put your finger in the pond and it will show you what your truest desire is. And so each girl goes, and the wish fish create a picture of whatever prince that she's decided she's in love with. And then Agatha gets up there and she does it, and she's like, I don't know what I want. I'm not interested in finding myself a prince. And she does it, and then she actually is able to grant the wish of the girl, a former student who had been converted into these fish for failing the class, and is able to grant her wish through her own true goodness, and turn her back out of being a fish and back into being a human, which both of them cause frustration because now faculty's like, we lost our magical animals. Thanks a lot. But it shows their true nature in that action. And then another key kind of moment where we see this dichotomy of good versus evil is in the final battle that Sophie stages the evil ball. What is that called? But she stages a ball for the School for Evil, and the School for Good becomes convinced that they are actually mounting an attack, and so the School for Good goes and attacks the School for Evil, saying, well, we need to have offense so that they don't come get us first, which then they arrive, and Sophie says, well, evil's supposed to attack and good defends, and good should be forgiving and not punishing and vengeful. And we were just over here minding our own business, and you came after us. And so then everything's flipped, and they're actually physically transformed to look like what the other version of themselves would be. And it kind of goes back and forth as the battle continues, where physically it becomes impossible to tell which side a student would be on, as it goes on, sort of revealing the flaws within that reasoning that, the good should always look beautiful and the bad should always look ugly. Yes. And the book shows that there's sort of no redeeming being evil. It's also not a bad thing if that's what your true nature is. Just slightly problematic. We don't want to... As an adolescent, please don't tell your adolescent that, like, well, if you feel like you're just truly a bad person, just embrace that and be a bad person. That's not ideal. That's not what we're looking for here. And so, but having the evil qualities, I think, in this book have less to do with what we would consider true evil within the broader sense of the real world term, and more are fairy tale evil. Because like if we look at this list, right, evil punishes. As a parent, as a teacher, you can say, no, there's a good time that like punishment is necessary in order for learning, as well as forgiveness, right? And that's by comparison, evil punishes and good forgives. Like, it is important to have both of those things to develop as a good person, to be able to do both those things in even measures where it is necessary. So it's all sort of about the internal nature of the person. The main kind of difference I saw as I was reading is good is selfless, whereas evil is selfish, right? Sophie is very much concerned with her own desires and pursuits, whereas Agatha does a little bit better of looking out for both of them in that. So obviously the real world is more nuanced. You are not truly good or truly evil, at least not in the like certain irredeemable sense of this is just who I am and what I need to embrace about myself. I'm a Christian, and so I believe that God is good and sin is bad, and we are corrupted by sin, and we are separated from him, and our true human nature is to pursue the desires of the flesh and the things that are bad for us, but that leads to separation from God, and it is only through the death and resurrection of Christ that we can be remade into, re-baptized into goodness. So yeah, God sometimes punishes us when we do the things we're not supposed to do, and thank goodness he does, or we would continue to do those things, right? And sometimes he takes things that we should not have from us, or that he has a better plan for our lives. And sometimes he does not give us the things that we want because, you know, as a parent, your kid maybe is like, please give me that knife, I want the knife, and you're not gonna give your small child a knife because they're just gonna hurt themselves with it. And so I think it's important to discuss what this looks like for you and your family. What does it mean to be a good person to you, to your children? Talk about that. I feel strongly in my beliefs, but I don't necessarily have all the answers in life. So, and yeah. So, all right, to wrap this up, so our last couple things, some discussion questions. I just have a few, but I think they're good places to start and then kind of see where the conversation goes, continue to talk about these things. So, you know, what are the qualities that someone has if they're a good person or an evil person? Does your child think that they are a good person? Why? What makes them a good person? You know, is it the things that they do? Is it because of who they are? Is it some sort of just the way things are? Yeah, talk about it. It's a little scary, but I think it's definitely something you can approach. And we're gonna see where it goes. As long as it's done with love. Please don't tell your child they're an evil person. That would be not good. Yes, so also kind of you can talk about friendships of what do you value in a friend, and what do you think is important for friends to be able to talk to each other about and to do together, and should friends always have the same values? Do they always need to agree on everything? Sorry, I dropped my notes here. Sophie and Agatha really struggle to adapt in their new schools in the way that they're labeled that. Talk to your kids about that. Do they have that same problem that, you know, at school, are they labeled one thing, or do they feel like they look like they should be one thing, but really there's something else, and sort of those deeper issues that you can get into, you know? That this book does a good job of kind of opening those doors and giving a launch pad for those kind of questions. So I have some recommended reading material for kind of where do we go next. Little Women feels you might be like, Nicole, you just talked about this crazy fantasy book with where just evilness, good and evil, and then you're like, Little Women. But no, I think Little Women does address a lot of those same ideas of what does it mean to develop, does it mean to kind of develop into a good person and to identify what your flaws are so that you can correct them and become better. Also, friendships play a key role within kind of those sisters and those female relationships, and what does that look like when they don't get along and things go poorly. Another book, Touching Spirit Bear. This one's a little bit less known. I read this at some point when I was in elementary school, and so it's on a pretty similar like AR like style level. So this is a more realistic, so not a little bit of a different direction than the fantasy theme, but it's about a teen who is sent to live on an island in the Alaskan wilderness as sort of a reform program after assaulting one of his classmates. And he really does seriously injure this classmate of his, and so it's like, you can go to juvie, or you can do this restorative justice practice of living on an island in the Alaskan wilderness, and so that's where he ends up. And so it deals with a lot of those questions of what does it mean to be a good person, and, you know, do the things you do make you a good or a bad person, and sort of there's a little bit more of a spirit of redemption in that. There is a couple of sort of mystic elements within it, specifically the spirit bear, which is, it is a real bear, but it's this giant, I think it's a white grizzly bear, but it may be a polar bear, but I think it's a white grizzly bear that shows up a couple times and is representative of sort of spiritual movement and change within this young man. Yes. And then my last one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So I'm a student at Christian Liberal Arts University, so I had to bring this one up at least at one point. But it covers sort of those, it has that fantasy element, distinction between what is good and what is bad, and sort of what does each of those mean from a biblical perspective, which is a nice counter to this book that's just like not. And you know, there's these children going through self-discovery, their personal relationships within that, so sort of the whole Chronicles of Narnia series is a good next step here, but specifically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is at the right kind of reading level, similar to School for Good and Evil. So yes, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was instructive and enlightening and helps you, you know, develop some new discussions and conversations within your family, and that maybe now you're a little more familiar with the books that your kids are reading and what's in them, and, you know, what are they learning, who are they becoming. So thank you so much.